So I'd like to just begin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
And it's great to have you both back. Yeah, so if we remember from last time, we had a couple of main subjects. I would say we had three kind of main topics, if I can summarize from last class. One was the topic of ijma, as it will relate to how we transmit knowledge from one generation to the next, basically epistemology, if you will, and how we use ijma as a source of guidance and basically direction for the community, for the ummah, if you will, and how this impacts particularly Zaydi philosophy, as it was taught by Imam Razvi. But surely there are many overlaps to also Hadawi's idea in this case, because the ijma is very fundamental for basically for all of Zaydiyat. And in fact, in many cases for Ahl Sunnat, whereby I would say that ijma is even more fundamental for Zaydiyat, but we can look at that going forward. Also, we had the topic of the crisis of epistemology in Islam. In other words, how are knowledge and wisdom transmitted from generation to generation? Basically, since the advent of modernity, of modern times, what has kind of transpired to make it, very challenging in that sense to grasp all of the knowledge that exists in Islam, and also how to move that forward and give it to the next generation. We live nowadays in a very postmodern world of internet and Instagram and Facebook, and even crazy guys like me get a platform to say whatever they want. Yeah. So basically, how can you believe? Yeah, is really the fundamental question. Yeah. And this is obviously leading to the question of the transmission of epistemology in Islam. And then the third topic came a little bit out of your group work, which I really appreciated. This was very well conceived. The question had been for the first team exercise had been, how do you see Bukhari's Zaydiyat compared with other forms of Zaydism? What are the correlations, differences, and what can be said about that? And does this prove that Zaydiyat can basically be very flexible to fit different contexts, different times, different regions, and so on? And I thought a very good discussion came out of it last time. Of course, it was also a little bit short, but just to pick up on that, I thought there were a couple of open questions still. So the main, I think one of the main open questions that you asked, also with Logan, of course, how to transmit Zaydiyya according to Bukhari's idea if there is no Sayyid basically to be the Imam, right? So if I'm remembering properly, this was one of the main questions that we had, right? And I gave an answer which was kind of a little bit of an esoteric answer, if you will, a kind of Batiniya answer, if you will, saying who says that the Sayyid has to be alive, okay? Which maybe has a certain value and a certain content. I put it out there more like a question and like a challenge a little bit, but also if we frame it properly, there may be some truth in it. I leave that to anyone to decide for themselves and think about and reflect. But I did also, during the week, I got back to Professor Mohammed Kalish from the University of Münster here in Germany about this question, because Professor Kalish took classes with Sayyid Razvi for something like 20 years or so, okay? And he was in fact his main student, if you will, over the time, and he was kind of projected to take over the small kind of little imamat of Hamburg, Germany, if you will, or of Germany, from Imam Razvi until he kind of changed direction in his life and basically left Islam and Zaydiyat behind him, yeah? So, but I did reach out to him because we do have a relatively good relationship, I would say quite a good relationship. And he did say that he was willing to support, our group on any kind of technical issues that we needed support on going forward. So that I thought was a very nice gesture of his. I will just, you know, if we have questions, if I'm hopefully able to answer, but if I cannot answer, I will always go back to Muhammad Kalish and ask him. And if he doesn't know, then it's Allahu Akbar, yeah? So we hope that we can somehow provide together answers for you, you know, for these kind of questions. And I did get back to him on this particularly. And he does, by the way, he asks that all the questions go through me and then I pass them to him. So I hope, you know, we can respect that. Of course, he has a number and an email, but he prefers that everything go through me and then we kind of keep the dialogue this way. I hope that's okay for you. But personally, I would be happy if you know, could reach out to him, but I think he prefers to be a little bit quiet in his own way. So, so having said that, I did ask him the question, you know, what was kind of also about the lineage, and because in the group there have been many questions about lineage, you know, who is the family and who is the teachers and who are the Nadvis and who are the Shibli Nomanis and all of these different questions, and aren't they Hanafi? How can you be saying they're Zaydi and all of these things? So there were lots of these kind of questions so far in the Facebook chat, especially, and in some private messages that I got from a lot of you. So what I'm going to try to do is I went through the whole thing again with Professor Kalish. We were online for 3 hours and I basically clarified, I'd like to believe that I clarified basically everything. And I will be replying to all of those questions again online in the Facebook chat, just revising, you know, who asked what and making sure that all of the blanks are filled, all of the holes are filled out so that we have a relatively clear picture. And we can basically leave it kind of steady like that, okay? And of course, you know, anybody who has a question can always ask and so on, but, you know, hopefully to leave this foundation really solid and then move on from there and really look at the theological aspects of what is being discussed. So to make it short, to put it in a nutshell, I'll just summarize it very quickly here. So again, Sayyid Razvi is a Razvi through Imam Ali Reza, through Jafar al-Kazab from the 10th generation, if that means anything to you. And basically his family on the father's side is Zaydi Sayyids, and on the mother's side actually belonged to the Lodi dynasty. I don't know how familiar you are with the Lodi dynasty in India. It's one of the largest land-owning and aristocratic families in India. And in fact, before partition, Imam Razvi had been trained as a child. He was born in 1930, and he had been trained as a child to kind of become an aristocrat, if you will, to kind of step into an aristocratic land-owning position. And this is how, of course, how the colonial structure functioned back in the pre-partition British India. So this was in a way what he was groomed for, if you will, and that did explain very much, you know, how he has this, you know, beautiful command of the English language and this incredibly diplomatic and very humorous and funny way of expressing his theology, which I wish I could, you know, show you. There are some old audio clips, but unfortunately all in German, so it's very hard to transmit that here. But certainly his aristocratic upbringing always came through, and his lineage as well. And there have been questions then also about the Nadvis, you know, there have been questions about the teachers and the link and all of this. And what I need to make clear, and I understand that this is very difficult for many to understand, especially for guys like me in the West, okay? Western guys like me, it's very difficult to understand this. I think the people from the Orient, from the East are a little bit, maybe have it a little bit easier to understand. So one thing is the lineage of the family, and another thing is the political, or let's say theological orientation, okay? What we need to understand is that the Zaydis of India always considered themselves Zaydis from family, even if they took different political positions in the generations, okay? So you'll have some Zaydis that migrated toward Ithna Ashariya. You'll have other Zaydis that migrated more toward Hanafi Islam. And therefore, in the later generations, you know, guys like Shibli Nomani, guys like Suleiman Nadvi, the different Nadvis actually, they kind of tended more toward a Hanafi Islam, even a very conservative Hanafi Islam, yeah, if you want to call it conservative, which does not mean that, you know, conservative does not mean anti-Zaydiyya, or Zaydiyya does not mean anti-conservative, but it's just, you know, in Yemen, for example, the Zaydiyya can be considered to be, you know, quite conservative compared to some of the things that are happening, for example, in the West, okay? So in Islam. So the one does not preclude the other, but it's simply to say that there was a political orientation also associated with the decisions of the individual Zaydi members of the families that took place in every generation, and that needs to be reflected. So if you do research on Sulaiman Nadvi, for example, you know, you'll see he's a Hanafi scholar, which is true, he was. But nevertheless, he was Zaydi in family, okay? And he approached the theological issues with an open mind toward ijtihad, which is not necessarily common in the Hanafi fiqh, okay? Not to say that it's not there, but it's not so common, yeah? So in that case, you can say that the Zaydiyyat, in that sense, the theology that remained was more like the way that problems theologically were approached by the Sayyids that were teaching. In terms of the usul al-fiqh, maybe the more like the approach, is ijtihad open? You know, are there ways to interpret things differently for a time and for a context? And those kind of questions, even if the fiqh turns out to be Hanafi leaning or is in fact reflective of Hanafi fiqh of its day and age. So I understand this is a little bit, a lot to kind of take apart and separate, but to make it simple, the teachings or the teachers of Imam Razvi were Zaydi in lineage, and the last couple of generations, you know, oriented toward Hanafi in fiqh, but still remain their Zaydi methodology in the way that they taught Islam, okay? So, and then the final question is, you know, what do you do when there's no Sayyid to be the Imam, let's say in a certain context? And apparently Professor Kalish had also asked this of Imam Razvi, which is good because I didn't ask it, to be honest. I was more focused on the theology than necessarily the lineage. But he did ask, and the answer was that we Sayyids, and by that Imam Razvi was speaking about himself and the Sayyids, are very proud of our non-Sayyid Zaydi teachers, okay? So how I interpret this is that if a Zaydi Imam chooses to pass his teaching and his lineage and his ijaza to a non-Sayyid Zaydi, and he gives in the ijaza the empowerment to continue to lead the community. And in fact, that's what Imam Razvi did with Professor Kalish. He had given him this right in the ijaza to continue to teach Zaydiyat according to his principles and those of the teachers before him, as it says in the ijaza certificate. Then indeed that is possible and that is transmittable. So the requirement of being a Sayyid appears to kind of drop back or fall away in the moment that there is no Sayyid to kind of keep the community alive. So in other words, keeping the community alive becomes more important at that moment than necessarily having a Sayyid there to stand as Imam, yeah? And if you remember, we also mentioned last time that, okay, one of the sayings of Imam Razvi was always, if there is no Imam, okay, whether Sayyid or not Sayyid, but if there is no Imam, then take the Quran to be your Imam. So in other words, read the Quran, study the Quran, look for the answers within, and read the Quran as though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were speaking directly to you, okay? So this is kind of just to summarize a little bit the big picture of, you know, what, I see that Tim is raising his hand, that's fantastic. Definitely I'll be finished in a moment. So this is basically the summary of our discussion with Professor Kalish and what we could kind of graft out of that. And I'd like to, let's say, present that to you. And as I said, I'll be presenting it on the Facebook page this afternoon, most likely. So, so Rashid, can you please go ahead and let us know your ideas?
Yeah, well, it wasn't so much an idea as it was an expansion on the question. I think I may have been the one that mentioned the issue of not having a Sayyid Imam.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even the Hadawis, they have like a position. I think it's muhtasib or something like that, to take care of the community in the absence of a Sayyid Imam. But my question, I guess my issue was more like, if I recall correctly, with them, you need to be the Imam to be a mujtahid. So my question was, in the according to your Imam, can one be a mujtahid without being a Sayyid Imam? I guess that was my question.
And the answer would be yes in that case, yeah. So
Okay, great.
so yes, because again, he's Imam Razvi is handing ijaza literally to different students, right, and giving them the grade of ijtihad, right.
Okay,
And in
that's
the
cool.
case of Professor Kalish and Sheikha Halima, in both cases, it's a full ijaza. So it's basically the right to transmit the entire pantheon of everything that had been taught to him in Zaydi fiqh, theology, kalam, usul al-fiqh, bataniya, irfaniya, and so on. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So does that answer your question, Rashid, to that extent?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Okay. So I guess if no more questions on that, I think we can summarize the teamwork from the first session. Okay. And thanks a lot again for that. I thought you guys did a great job coming up with the relevant replies and questions, and we hope to go forward in the same direction. Well, today's class is going to continue on the subject of ijma as will be kind of the main integrator of the next kind of 10 classes, if you will, or 10 in total, including the 10 principles of Imam Razvi, as I have collected them for writing the book that I'm going to bring out hopefully during the next year, if all goes well, inshallah. And what I'd like to share with you on the screen, again, if you didn't have it from last time, let me just pull this out, is the first principle, very brief, again, very briefly summarized. I really tried to be as short and sweet as possible with this, because of course the classes are limited, and we want to make sure that we give you guys an opportunity to reply on that. So let me just go on to this. Let me see if I can share the screen, or do you have the document in front of you guys?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm seeing that this is a little bit complicated to share the screen at the same time as I record, so let me fix those technical problems next time. But for now, maybe we can just, Mohammed, you have the document also, yeah? Okay, so let's maybe just go through this, and I will just kind of read it, and we'll get into this in a moment. Maybe we go paragraph for paragraph, and we'll explain what is the kind of school of thought here. So principle number 1 of Islam according to Imam Razvi, and again, please remember that the question behind this is, how do you see Islam in today's day and age, or how do you see Islam in this postmodern society that we live in, okay? And so Imam Razvi is basically asking this question of his students. At the same time, he's replying to it through his teaching. So Islam is humaneness. What does this mean? In the enlightened sense, if you're familiar with the Enlightenment period and the philosophy of enlightenment, what we're saying is that every human being is an elementary part of society and entitled to certain basic human rights, no matter what their religion, their gender, their race, their wealth, their status, their caste, and so on in society. They're all entitled to a certain set of basic rights, and obviously a certain set equally of basic duties, okay? What Imam Razvi is teaching is Islam is saying exactly the same thing, but 1,400 years before, okay? Or if we take the Enlightenment as a 300-year process or 400-year process, let's say at least 1,000 years before, okay? What does this mean? That in Islam, as in the Enlightenment period, this applies to every person, and we talked about what was the background of that. from the perspective of Imam Razvi, Islam contributes to a refined vision of humanity. I think all Muslims would say the same thing. This vision of humanity is expressed both in the overarching principles and in the everyday actions of Islam. And then I listed a few very basic examples of the principles: equality of all people before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, finding a fair distribution of wealth within society through the instruments of zakat and sadaqah, and the prohibition of riba, okay, and speculation, okay. All of these things create a fair distribution of wealth within society. I think Muhammad knows the best about this of all of us. Maybe one day Muhammad wants to give a special course on Islamic finance to us. If you want to.
The Hanafi perspective, right?
Okay.
The Hanafi perspective.
Fine. Good.
The Shafi'i perspective is very different.
Well, I'm interested in that. We can take that. I'll just throw that out there. I'm throwing it out there. Okay. If you have nothing to do and you feel like diving into this, you're very welcome to take over at some point and show us. I'd love to learn more about this. So
Sure.
But having said that, so the fair distribution of wealth within society, obviously high quality respect for people, animals, and for our environment. Just the description of Jannat in the Quran is enough to make you conscious of environmental care and issues. And of course, the conscious respect for freedom of religion, la ikraha fid din, expression of religion for all people, and many, many more examples, okay? And as for the humaneness of everyday actions in Islam, you can take the very high position of family within society in Islam, the washing of the hands and feet. Hey, nobody thought this was important before. Now we have the virus, okay? So now, suddenly, Islam looks pretty intelligent, okay? Because now everyone is running around, disinfecting their hands, keeping distances socially, covering their face. A friend of mine was at an airport in Turkey recently, and he said, SubhanAllah, this is the first time I've been in an airport in Turkey, I haven't seen a woman's face, yeah? So, you know, Islam is maybe coming in a very different way these days than we would ever have expected. So, Alhamdulillah. So washing the hands and the body several times during the day, taking off your shoes before entering family homes. Again, look at the focus on hygiene and cleanliness, yeah? For not transmitting diseases, okay, and viruses, for example. The multiple instruments for social equilibrium between rich and poor, and many more examples, okay? And I just took this one, you know, very basic Quran verse, and please don't mistake, you know, when I take Quran verses as like some kind of attempt at complete theology. Obviously, that's not the point. The point is just that there's always a starting point to do research and to dive into things, and the starting point should always be, in my view, and also the view of Imam Razvi, should always be the Quran in any case, okay? So that's really all we're trying to say. You know, you can take things apart, we can find different verses in Quran, we can look at the hadith collections, all of the things that the scholars have said over thousands of years, it's all okay. It's all okay, 1,400 years, okay? And we honored the children, and we honored the children of Adam and brought them over, alayhi salam, and we brought them over land and sea and provided them with valuable goods and raised their position from the rest of creation. Okay? So again, this is just the first principle, and you know what I'd really like to give you guys as maybe a little bit of, let's make it the team exercise for the next class, okay? And again, today we're just making a really short class to kind of wrap up the last week, okay? Is to really go into this team exercise discussion, think about this parallel Islam's humaneness, compare it with whatever you know about Enlightenment period, okay? Did the Enlightenment really produce original ideas that were not already contained in Islam? Okay, are things like the equality of humanity, are things like freedom of religion, a fair participation in society, a fair participation of wealth, are all of these things not already inherently grafted into Islam, taught in Islam? If no, that's fine. Please say so, yeah? If yes, please elaborate. If no, please elaborate. If sometimes yes, sometimes no, please elaborate. Feel free to use examples not only from Quran and Hadith, feel free also to use contrasting examples from the philosophers of the Enlightenment period. Okay? And again, the reason I like the idea of the teamwork is to get you guys to practice ijma and find a kind of consensus amongst yourselves. As Imam Razvi used to always say, where there's no consensus, there's only nonsense. Okay, so try to find consensus, please, in the teamwork. And okay, I've got Tim chatting to us. Okay, that's nice. I feel like my third eye just opened. Are you making fun of us?
No, that question about whether Islam contains things that were in the, or whether the Enlightenment contained things that were in Islam anyway. I just felt like, whoa, like I'm mind blown.
Thank you very much. Well, that's why we hold this class every first Sunday of the month. And I'm very happy to get that feedback. So thanks a lot for that, Rashid. And again, let your eye open, let your third eye open. And feel into that question with your intuition, not only with aql as intellect, okay, but also aql as intuition, okay? Because some scholars in Islam have limited aql to the intellect, but intellect has many layers, yeah? The lowest layer is logic, okay? But many of us in Islam, we get stuck on the layer of logic. Okay, some unfortunately don't even reach logic. I wish that we could say that at least. But the ones that do break into logic, they get very proud of themselves and they stay at the station of logic, okay? But there are levels and layers of intellect that go far beyond logic, okay? So aql is a much broader thing than simply logic. So go into these kind of questions that I give you, not only with aql in the sense of mantiq or logic, but also in the sense of intuition, or what Shahabuddin Suhrawardi used to call as dhawq, okay, with the taste in your mouth, okay? So go ahead and look at that, and I'll be posting this video, and again, the question, the team exercise for the week. Maybe you can see if you can catch Logan, and maybe a few of the other guys. I always have guys writing to me on private message, I'm so sorry I couldn't participate, I'll come next time, you know? So, hey, anybody who wants to come can come, you know? So go ahead and feel free to chat with the guys in the group and see if we can find some ijma on this for the next class.
Sure.
Okay, any further questions for now? If not, then I'll just respectfully close the session. I'll say thank you very much, and maybe we can do a Fatiha for close. So feel free to do with me. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Okay. All right, guys, wonderful to see you and hear you, and have a wonderful rest of the month. And as I said, I'll be online with the chat, and any questions you have in the month, feel free to reach out.
Sure, inshallah.
Okay, Sheikh, thank you.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.